So for Mark and everyone else who wants to see how I wrote my book, Land the Job, using Highland 2, Dropbox, and LeanPub, this is sort of my overview of the tools I used and kind of my process. So brief introduction to Highland 2. This is it. It's very much a distraction-free editor, and the format is in Markdown, which is straightforward enough when you get used to it, and it provides a lot of features to make sure that it's easy for people who aren't familiar with Markdown. One example is if I wanted to italicize this sentence, instead of me remembering what do, I can just use a standard like Command or Control I, and it will do that for me. So it has a lot of the hotkeys for formatting that will wrap your text in the appropriate Markdown format. So I don't have to think about it too much, but honestly, it's not too hard to learn them. The other things that I used quite a lot is the sprint feature, which I go in here and set my timer. My standard timer is 15 minutes. You may notice some 5s. That's what I do for my newsletters to control my word count. And it has this little report, which every now and then I like to look at and be like, dang, go me. But what I see when I look at this report is that I tend to converge pretty evenly around like a 600 to 800 word count per 15 minutes. And this is really helpful for me when I'm planning how much I need to write, or when I was doing my book, I was in a NaNoWriMo competition thing. So I needed to produce 50,000 words in a month. And knowing this, I could actually like break it down mathematically to know how much I needed to write and just get to it. This is also what helped me figure out what my writing should be when I do newsletters. So I set a 5-minute timer, and that knocks it down to about 200, 250 words, which people say is a good amount for a newsletter. So sprinting is kind of I'm almost always using a sprint when I write. And it's just right there. Nice front and center in Highland. When you do a sprint, it just sets a timer there, and it makes a little noise when you're done, and then it annoyingly asks you to tweet it, but whatever. Let's see if it asks. No. So that's the main features that I use in Highland. Pretty simple. A couple other things that were helpful for me writing my book were in the drawer here, there's this goal feature where when I knew I had to write 50,000 words a month, that equated to 1,667 words a day. So I could set my goal in to that number and then start sprinting towards it, which for me was like 2.5, 3 sprints. When I got behind, I could do the math, set the goal higher, and keep sprinting. So this was pretty helpful over time for me to do more sustained writing endeavors when I had to go beyond a standard 15 minutes. But these were the 2 primary features I used in Highland to produce a book. I want to share a little other thing, which is how I started, because I didn't need to use this, but it actually set the way I wrote and wound up actually working out for me in terms of how LeanPub worked as well, which was sort of a happy circumstance. So I created this master file, and what I did was ask myself, what are the questions as a reader I would want to know about how to get a job? And had a couple big questions. Those form my chapters, and then for each one, I went in and sort of identified what are the questions within that I would have to answer to cover that topic. Then I would create a file for that chapter and write it. When I was done, I would put this notation in, which basically told Highland, when you are about to export the book, stitch this file in at this place. So my master file could be sort of it could be an organizational file with some introduction material or whatever, but ultimately stitch all the full chapters in when I needed. Instead of me having to work in one massive file, I could keep it separate. My brain thought, that's a great idea. It also happened to be the case that LeanPub naturally wanted me to work that way. So even though I didn't need this master file long term, it was a really easy way for me to start and do the kind of outlining that for better or for worse, I did it this way. So let's get back to how this works. So when I'm done editing a file, what I do is I save it. I'll shove it into Grammarly, check it all out, put it all back here, save it, and then I will export it as a text file to a Dropbox folder that LeanPub will create for me. I didn't create it, LeanPub did. And I would put it in my manuscript, named however I wanted. And I would just put my files here. That's more or less the process. I write it, edit it, all that stuff in Highland, save it, then export it back out here. So I have But essentially I have two copies floating around. One is a text file and one is a Highland file. Now in here, in that same folder, are a couple of other interesting things to show you, which are that in the manuscript folder, so this has got some obvious mess in it. I had to do some major restructuring at some point, so it's not as clean as it ought to be. There are these three files. Now the most important one is book. So you put all these files in here, but LeanPub doesn't know what to do with them. You have to tell it which files go in which order. So the book file does this. So you just order them however you want, put them in here. Like this, the numbers don't matter. Those are my file names. I did that so I knew what to do with it. But as I wrote a file, I would just put it in here in the correct order and get done with it. These two chapters, oddly, I had to split at one point, so I had to rename and redo everything. So that was kind of a pain in the butt with the numbering, but this is how it in the end, when you export the book, it's going to pull all these files in and stitch them together. Sample, if you want to create a published sample of your book. So for me, I have an introduction and a chapter that I publish as a sample. It publishes a book with this. And a subset is mostly for my preview stuff. If I want to preview a piece because I've been doing a lot of work in it and I just want to see that, I can stitch it that way. I really didn't use this much, but it's there. Now, when I've written enough and I want to see my book, I just can't wait, gotta do it. I come into LeanPub and the main area I look at is preview or publish, preview new version. Now, the main thing here is I select, do I want the full or that subset, book or subset, and click create preview. It pulls all the files out of Dropbox, does its work for about 5 minutes, tells me it's done. I can download them here, or I can also download them in that same folder. It puts them there as well. So it's everywhere I want it to be. Like I can just get the stuff wherever. This is where it would be here, previews and samples. And then the published versions go in the similar folder. But this is the main thing is write. When I've got enough there, I might do a preview and check to see how it looks in different formats, make sure the formatting's right. There was a pretty big difference in how it handled links and footnotes. So I did actually have to look at across all these versions and find a format that finally worked. There's some LeanPub special formatting I had to learn how to do and try that over and over again. And you get 20 previews a month, which seems like a lot, but you can actually go through those pretty quick, especially as you're learning like the LeanPub specific formatting and trying to get it to look right across multiple versions. You can go through them quick. I never bumped into the 20, but I swear I would get close. Now, how I set it up with this particular Dropbox thing, I actually can't recall where I found that specific option. There's lots of ways to get your book in, and there's lots of ways to do all of this. I just found this Dropbox thing somewhere hiding out in here, and I said, yeah, that'll probably work. And it turned out that the way they wanted to do in Dropbox were the files, which I had already set myself up for, so it kind of all worked out just fine. When you go to export for Amazon, you'll need some of these options. The unbranded ebook takes out the LeanPub copyright. Print Ready does the same and removes some pages on each end. I bumped into that a couple of times too and figured that one out. But by and large, my workflow is writing, exporting to the Dropbox folder, coming in here and saying preview. And then when I'm finally done, I just go into publish and say, bam, publish, and away it goes. And it'll tell me what I should do instead. But it's the same basic process. Nothing's really different about it. And that's kind of it. Those are sort of how I use the three tools. Wish I could tell you exactly where the Dropbox option is, but I don't remember where it is, unfortunately. I thought it was in here, but I just don't know. So anyway, that's sort of my workflow, and let me know what other questions you have, and I hope this was helpful for you. Bye.